And time now for our PIX panel. Joining me this week, PIX 7 political reporter Henry Rosoff and host of the Max Politics podcast, Ben Max. Good to have both of you here.
Good morning.
So let's talk about this, gentlemen. Former President Trump back in New York City for his ongoing civil fraud trial. At one point, the judge called him to the stand, right? And then he got up and stormed away. So, Henry, you've been covering the trial for quite some time. Take us inside the courtroom and what exactly happened here.
It was a surreal moment. I mean, a notable gasp. We thought that this was just going to be an exchange between the lawyers, and former President Trump's lawyers said, well, he meant Michael Cohen. He didn't mean to insult the clerk, which would have run afoul of the judge's gag order from week one of the trial. And then the judge, kind of with a bit of a smirk, said, well, I'm going to have my own evidentiary hearing. Mr. Trump, get on the stand. And we were sitting there, and we were frankly shocked. And then the former president repeated essentially what his lawyers said. He said, no, I was talking about Michael Cohen. I think it's definitely subject to the interpretation. The judge very clearly thought the former president was lying. Well, you lie on the stand, and so the next thing we were expecting in the room is, oh my goodness, is he going to hold him in contempt of court and literally drag the former president to jail? That's obviously not what happened. He fined him $10,000 and we moved on. But it was quite the courtroom drama.
Yeah, well, there's never a dull moment in a courtroom. I want to talk about what's happening in the world of politics as well, because we just spoke to the mayor's chief of staff about the budget. A lot of talk about the budget, specifically cuts to education. So, Ben, let me speak to you first about this, because you went one-on-one with the City Council Speaker Adrienne Adams on your podcast. Did she give you any insight on how the City Council plans to handle required cuts from the mayor?
Yeah, she indicated there's going to be some real battles here. The City Council is not going to look kindly upon the city clawing back money from schools. Now, she did indicate that where enrollment is down significantly at some schools, there might need to be some funding reductions, but she also indicated she wants to see it done on a school-by-school basis with a lot of input from stakeholders. So I think we're gearing up for some real battles here, first over education funding to the schools. That's coming up very soon. And then on the mayor's mid-fiscal year budget update, which is due in a few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, the chief of staff talked about how those cuts are still on the table for education, citing enrollment's up in some schools while down in others, but that the cuts overall to all of the agencies are on the table, as is a hiring freeze, which is happening, in her words, indefinitely. So, Henry, what do you make of all this when it comes to the pen and paper and getting the numbers down, right? What exactly the mayor has to do to get the City Council on board?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of scrutiny on what the mayor and his team is and is not doing relative to the migrant crisis. And what I mean by that is the state has basically promised between a budget item and other spending about $1.5 billion to help the city with the migrant crisis. Well, the state comptroller just put out kind of a dashboard tracker, and the state really hasn't paid much of that money to the city. And the state says, you got to submit receipts and get some reimbursement here. The cost of housing the migrants is also going up, not down over time, which the mayor's office said should be somewhat of an expectation. So I think the City Council is going to grind the mayor on why it can't keep this migrant crisis cost under control, and that's going to be a big feature of this budget debate as well.
And then on a broader scale, right, there was a lot of drama that played out. And Brent, let me bring you back into this conversation, because what happened in Washington, D.C. the past couple of weeks, looking for a speaker. Moderate holdouts seemingly caving now to the more conservative caucuses. I just spoke to Congressman Torres about this. So, Ben, let me talk to you about the totality of all this and how this might impact the Republican congressman, specifically in New York, somebody like Mike Lawler, who was in a pretty tough district.
Listen, Republicans who won districts that had previously gone for Joe Biden in 2020 are already going to be in some trouble in 2024. But the fact that New York swing district Republicans just installed a very socially conservative speaker into that position is very likely to hurt them even more than what we might have expected. And I think there were some real challenges around how these Republicans felt about needing the House to move on and have a speaker versus trying to vet all the particular beliefs and background of that speaker candidate. And this choice is very likely to come back to hurt them because the ads are already being
And Ben, what I'll say in defense of some of those moderate Republicans, they were between a rock and a hard place. I mean, they could either let the government default because you don't have a speaker to fund the government, or put somebody in there. So that's going to be their counter argument. Now, I'm not disagreeing with anything that you're saying, but that's going to be their defense of all of this. Will that matter when it comes to issues like LGBTQ rights and abortion, a number of the other things Congressman Torres outlined? We'll see. That's what the election will be for.
Yeah, but besides somebody like Lawler, who's in a district that is tough because President Biden won in that area, are there other Republicans in some of these districts, like, say, George Santos' seat, that might be in jeopardy, not only because of the speaker race, but because of what's actually playing out in real time with somebody like a Santos? Ben.
Well, Santos's seat is absolutely in play for Democrats, no matter who the Republican nominee is. Republicans will be better off if it's not George Santos, but that district is definitely in play for Democrats. The district that Mark Molinaro won, a little bit more upstate and towards Western New York, is in play. I mean, there's a few that are undoubtedly in play, and Long Island seems to be trending more Republican, but in a presidential year, you never know.
We shall see how all of this plays out. It's going to be a very interesting race come next year for so many of these seats. Henry, Ben, great to have both of you. And we will be right back, everybody.